With less than 3 weeks to go until the federal election, Labor is strengthening its winning position in today's news poll. Labor's primary vote has lifted a point to 38%. Two-party preferred, Labor has held its strong lead, 53 to 47.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And with the election campaign past halfway, opinion polls are making headlines again, with two national polls in the Nine and News Corp mastheads last night showing Labor well ahead. And in the Nine papers, chief political correspondent David Crowe claimed time is running out for another Morrison miracle, telling readers,
Labor is within sight of a thumping victory that takes the party into majority government and drives the coalition out of more than a dozen seats.
But can we trust the pollsters anymore? And should the media believe them this time around? In 2019, the Big Five national polls all predicted a Labor win, after Newspoll had put Labor in the lead for 55 polls in a row. And on election day, most of the media told readers to expect a Bill Shorten victory.
Shorten, sweet.
Labor gains crucial edge.
Shorten ahead in final poll.
And then, in the only vote that mattered, Shorten lost.
Oh my God.
With the coalition beating Labor 51.5 to 48.5 on the two-party preferred, in a mirror image of what the polls had predicted, which had the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age explaining to readers,
Polling companies are the main reason Saturday night's result took voters, the media and many political operatives by surprise.
So, was it a late swing to the coalition? And did any of the top five pollsters get it right? Answers, no and no. In 2020, an inquiry found the polls had over-represented Labor's vote by close to 3% and had been making a similar mistake for years because they were skewing their samples
towards the more politically engaged and better educated voters.
So why had this happened? As University of Sydney's Dr. Stephen Mills explained on ABC Radio,
in the day when everybody had landline phones, it was relatively easy to get a clear, good sample of the entire population. Today, mobile phones and online panels, they're not really inherently representative. And so the big development in polling really over the last couple of decades has been in weighting. And I think this is where a lot of the polls came adrift in 2019, this weighting process. They overestimated certain demographics, which happened to be more Labor voting demographics.
It's no surprise then that this time around the media are much more gun-shy in their reporting, with caveats like this.
According to the published opinion polls, Labor is ahead, but the polls have been wrong before.
So, will the polls do better this time? To judge by the pollsters' recent efforts, the answer should be yes. In the South Australian election in March, the final news poll nailed a Labor landslide. In last year's Western Australian election, the final news poll also picked the winner, although it underestimated the margin of victory. And in the 2020 Queensland election, the final news poll again got the result, but not the margin right. So, what have the pollsters done to make things better? In the case of Newspoll, run by YouGov, it has moved from a mix of telephone and online polling in 2019 to 100% online. And it now makes extra effort to contact certain groups, as Campbell White explained on 2GB.
Younger people who didn't go to university, particularly if they're on higher incomes, they're quite difficult to get in surveys. So you actually have to go after and make sure you've got enough of those sort of people. People in rural areas is another group that if you don't actually actively make sure your sample's representative, it's not going to be. We're actually targeting the groups that we need for our survey to make sure that the whole sample is representative of the Australian voting population.
The pollsters are also being more careful in framing their results. As Essential's Peter Lewis explained to the ABC, they now make it clearer when voters remain undecided.
There used to be this false representation of voter sentiment whenever you put out a poll that said 53-47 as if everyone had had their view. If you went into the last election saying Labor's ahead 49-45 but there are still to 6 to make up their mind, rather than Bill Shorten was on a victory lap because the polls had him 2 points ahead, the media would have covered it very differently, and I suspect there would have been a different conversation and potentially a different outcome.
The headline figure in most polls is the two-party preferred. That's what decides the winner on the night, at least on a national basis. And today's Resolve and news poll figures have Labor leading 54-46 or 53-47, which would give them victory, and see the coalition lose 10 seats. But that two-party preferred figure has real problems as a predictor. First, because of all the undecided voters who may jump one way and not the other. And second, because the winner is not decided by the national vote, but in 151 different votes in seats and states around the country. And the outcome of those is much harder to predict. As former Labor numbers man Stephen Conroy told Sky News 2 weeks ago,
the focus that everyone's had over the last few years around this 2PP number, 55-45 or 53-47, is just utterly misleading.
Yeah.
Because when the regions are reacting so differently, when Western Australia has such a strong anti-Morrison view and Queensland has such a positive Morrison view, then you can't extrapolate from a national figure and go, right, well, that means Labor should win 15 seats on this 2PP number. This is just a deeply flawed analysis, and too many journalists are focused on this.
So, can we say anything about how the different states are going? Crikey's poll expert Poll Bludger claims pollsters agree there has been a paradigm shift to Labor in WA, which will see the Liberals lose 3 seats and their majority in Canberra. He says New South Wales and South Australia have also swung Labor's way, but in Queensland nothing is clear. And predicting results in individual seats is even harder despite the headlines.
New polling reveals the coalition is set to lose a key inner-city Sydney seat to a Climate 200-backed Teal Independent. The polling, commissioned by the LGBTQI+ organisation Equality Australia, shows Independent Allegra Spender is on track to win the seat of Wentworth from the Liberal MP Dave Sharma.
Last week, the media had several reports of a poll suggesting that Independent Allegra Spender would win the seat of Wentworth, following which the bookies made her favourite to win the seat. And the week before that, the Herald Sun was suggesting Treasurer Josh Frydenberg could lose Kooyong, based on a poll commissioned by independent candidate Dr Monique Ryan, which gave her a thumping lead of 59 to 41%. But how accurate are those numbers? Polling analyst Kevin Bonham says not very, telling MediaWatch,
all seat polling is unreliable and should be treated with great caution. A further issue is that this poll was commissioned by a candidate. Given the size of recent seat poll errors, it is still possible for even a poll with this margin to have the wrong winner.
And Dr Jill Shepherd from ANU is another to suggest we should take the results of any single-seat poll with a large pinch of salt.
Single-seat polls often get pretty heavily derided by academics and other commentators, and they deserve all of that scorn so far in Australia. The biggest problem with polling is being able to identify the population that you want to ask, how they're going to vote, and then being able to contact them. And that's hard on a national level, but it's almost impossible on a seat level.
So it's worth bearing all that in mind before you run off to the bookies with your hard-earned cash, or get your hopes up or down. Meanwhile, you probably don't need polling to tell you the so-called Teal independents, like Allegra Spender in Wentworth, Dr Monique Ryan in Kooyong, Zoe Daniel in Goldstein, and Kylie Tink in North Sydney, do have a chance of winning seats off the Liberals. And that threat to the government has made them and Zali Steggall in Warringah prime targets for the coalition cheer squad at News Corp.
This group of fake independents will probably fool plenty of voters at this election. They may even hold the balance of power and run this country into the sewer because of their useless and obsessive attempts to save the planet from Australia. But don't be one of those fools. Vote for anyone. Vote for anyone else. Just not a bunch of elite greenies who won't tell voters what their real mission is all about.
The Teal independents are mostly women, often targeting moderate Liberals, and are for action on climate change, corruption and gender equity. They're backed with money from businessman Simon Holmes à Court's Climate 200 group, which has teal or blue-green colours. And it's that support and the coordinated nature of their campaign that has the government and News Corp crying foul.
Don't vote for the anti-Liberal candidates because they're anti-Liberal.
Therefore, they are fake independents and they're deceiving voters.
Well, of course they are. Of course they are.
That line from the PM is echoed daily by commentators on Sky After Dark.
They are an electoral fraud, a phony group of Green left activists who want to trick people into voting for them.
Fake independents are going to cause trouble.
If you want to support vapid candidates spewing motherhood statements with no real policy detail, then go right ahead.
And if you open the Daily Telegraph, you'll see it's not just democracy the independents put at risk. It's your steak dinner too.
Climate crazy's wild plan.
Eating insects instead of beef and vaccinating cows by drone to produce less methane. This is Australia in 2030 if teal independents hold the balance of power.
Yep, a couple more independents in Parliament and it's bugs for dinner, the Telegraph warned a fortnight ago, with this dramatic expose inside the paper.
Climate cults' cuckoo land ideas laid bare.
It's the sort of wacky headline usually reserved for the Greens, but in this election it's the climate independents who are copping the flak. Of 21 Telegraph articles about them, since April 10, when the election was called, 2/3 have been negative, with only one mildly positive. And those who have copped the most heat are those with the best chance of winning. Former ABC journalist Zoe Daniel was dragged through the tabloids for signing a pro-Palestinian open letter before becoming a candidate. And Wentworth independent Allegra Spender was branded a hypocrite for chairing a business taking government green grants while arguing for tougher climate targets. Meanwhile, telecolumnists Joe Hildebrand and Vicky Campion, partner of Nationals leader Barnaby Joyce, have laid into their lack of logic and their snake oil policies. Over at News Corp's The Australian, Spender, Daniel and Ryan in Kooyong have all been whacked, along with Simon Holmes à Court himself, who the Oz warned in a front-page exclusive last week was set to cash in.
Chance of clean energy windfall for Climate 200 boss if team gets up.
Of 38 stories and columns we counted in The Australian on Team Teal, that's more than one a day, 20 were bad news for the candidates and only 2 were positive. And in case any doubt remained about the paper's view, this editorial cleared it up.
Why risk instability, uncertainty? Candidates without sound policies are dicing with the nation's future.
We asked the editors of The Australian and the Daily Telegraph if they thought their coverage of the independent candidates was fair and balanced, but we did not hear back. Hosts and guests on Sky After Dark have also been piling on, with Peter Credlin offering a gloomy 13-minute feature on the independent threat, which kicked off with this warning from her old boss, former PM Tony Abbott.
They're basically Labor in disguise, that's what they are. So be under no illusions, this is a false flag operation.
Credlin then railed at the injustice of only Liberal MPs being targeted.
Why these Climate 200 guerrilla games matter is not just that Liberal seats could fall, but that Liberal campaign hardheads will waste time and money trying to hang on to electorates that by right shouldn't be at risk.
Note the words, by right. And, rounding it off, she had Liberal Senator James McGrath warning that the Teal independents were part of a nasty cabal of anti-coalition forces.
I'm talking just not the Labor Party and the Greens, the unions, ABC, SBS, Fairfax, and now we've got these people. And they're all working together, clearly working together, to make sure that we lose the coming election.
And because the independents have been coy about which party they would support if elected and if there was a hung parliament, Chris Kenny ramped it up last week, declaring they are a risk to the country.
They will plunge Australia into the riskiest parliamentary experiment in modern history, at perhaps the most ominous period in our nation since the Second World War.
So ominous, in fact, that the Sunday Herald Sun gave its front page yesterday to Josh Frydenberg to talk about the fight of his life and warn of a horror show for the country if independents are elected. And inside the paper came a call to arms lifted straight from a campaign ad.
Why you need to vote for me.
Not even a pretence of objectivity there, and that is in its news pages. Now, we're certainly not saying that independent candidates and Climate 200 should be immune from scrutiny. But when news reporters and columnists of one of the country's most powerful media groups echo the Liberal Party's concerted attack on them, something is very wrong. But now, to the war in Ukraine and wishful thinking from the media amid claims that the Russian leader may be dying.
Video has emerged of Vladimir Putin appearing to be ill and gripping the corner of a table to stop his handshaking.
Speculation that Putin is sick surfaced in February when he kept his distance from French President Emmanuel Macron at the end of this long table. But now it is footage of him slouched at another table and tapping his foot that has the media medics abuzz, with the New York Post declaring last week that Putin
has been seen by a cancer doctor 35 times and is said to bathe in the blood extracted from deer antlers.
Amazing, eh? Meanwhile, this grainy video of Vlad the Invader meeting Belarus's President Lukashenko caused speculation in tabloids around the world that he was gravely ill.
Look at hand and leg tremors. Putin looks visibly ill in new appearance as war rages.
The Daily Express reckoned it must be Parkinson's disease and claimed the Russian leader may have invaded Ukraine in part because of it. Wow, that is some theory. So, could they be right? Luckily, the Irish Independent was on hand to compare and contrast Putin's body language back in 2005 and study his table manners. And you'll never believe it, but he was tapping his foot back then. So he must have had Parkinson's for years, or not. Strangely enough, the Daily Express had looked at that same video and Putin's bloated face and neck and come up with a different theory, citing rumours the president has cancer, or thyroid cancer to be precise, which was being treated with steroids. And 2 months ago, the UK Telegraph was diagnosing even more serious problems, listing
5 reasons to suggest puffy-faced Putin could be seriously ill.
And claiming the Russian leader has a brain tumour or is addicted to steroids, while the trusty Daily Mail put it all together into one catch-all disease, telling the world that
Putin is suffering from a brain disorder caused by dementia, Parkinson's disease, or roid rage resulting from steroid treatment for cancer, intelligence sources have claimed.
But taking the armchair doctor's prize was the UK's Daily Star, which smashed them all with this front page.
Mad Vlad dying of cancer!
Claiming that Putin had a terminal illness that's made him desperate to invade. So how does that work? Well, it's bowel cancer, said the Star. And his unsmiling expression shows he is in constant pain. Adding it could have made him more aggressive, or he may be attacking Ukraine as he knows he is dying. And there you have it, proof. But haven't we seen these stories before? Well, yes, we have. Here are the UK's 2 leading tabloids, The Mirror and The Sun, back in 2020, stating confidently that Putin was about to quit because of Parkinson's and growing fears for his health. Unfortunately, the Russian leader is still alive, still in charge, and still committing war crimes. And that's all from us for tonight. There's more on our website where you can stream or download the programme and see a full statement from polling analyst Kevin Bonham. And don't forget, Media Bites every Thursday. But for now, until next week, goodbye.